The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Canna Chat. I'm Ralph Tyko with a very special guest. He is Dan Rush, an old friend. How are you, Dan?
I'm good, Ralph. How are you?
Okay. Good. Scared me there. Delayed response. Thank you for honoring me and returning to the airwaves. You were one of the first guests that I had when I did a show in San Francisco at the old FCC not-so-free radio station run by John Miller. And you came to the studio. We sat and chatted. It was direct.
Ralph,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I didn't know we were doing the show right now. I thought we were doing the reading. I gotta hold on one second, okay? I'm sorry. Can we do the show part on the speakerphone?
No.
No. Okay. How long are we going to do this? I'm sorry.
Just long enough for you to tell your story, Dan.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead. Let us know. Let us know what happened. You have the most interesting story of the 20th century since O.J. Put it to you that way.
I don't know.
To me, anyway, Dan, you may or not even know this. We really don't broach the subject of cannabis very often. I've been a wake-and baker for like 45 years, and I cannot wait until it is totally legalized. And I want to take us back to the point that you came in the cannabis industry when it was legal for medical consumption only in California. And you started by forming a union. Tell us how that started, what precipitated it, and then tell us your very interesting story of how things really unraveled for a while. Dan Rush.
Okay, thanks, Ralph. And God, I always love doing your radio show. I'll tell you, it was Thanksgiving of 2009, Thanksgiving of 2008, and so I ran the Special Operations Division of UFCW Local 5 at the time. And what Special Ops did was we would monitor the political horizon, and we would look for legislation and initiatives and policy that would affect our members. And so anything that was good for us, my team and I would go in and we would flower it up to work for our members. And if it was policy that was bad for our members or bad for a variety of social issues besides labor, then we would go in and kill it. And so that's what I did for a very long time.
Okay. And how did marijuana or cannabis come into the picture initially? How did your antenna go up that, wow, this is an industry that needs some unionizing?
So most people that work in the political industry are type A personalities. We all smoke cigarettes, we drink coffee, we get into these very enthusiastic, passionate, eager, maniacal tendencies. And so my favorite thing to act like I was a good family guy was go home on Thanksgiving and scour the internet for anything that might be something that we needed to do. So I was sitting at home on Thanksgiving, and also November, the third week of November is when new initiatives will pop up on the Secretary of State's calendar. Things that are going to be run on the next ballot will pop up on the internet through the Secretary of State.
Now,
So
what year is this, Dan? What year are we talking about?
God, let me think. It was 2009.
Okay.
It was 2009. So I'm sitting at home and scouring the internet at 3 a.m. looking for initiatives, hopeful initiatives that have been filed through the Secretary of State. And my problem was I was getting aggravated because I kept bumping into all these cannabis topics. And so cannabis was like, at the time to me, I was 10 or 11 years clean and sober. And I had not even thought about smoking a joint or cannabis in 15 years. And so I literally bumped into 4 cannabis initiatives filed in 2009 for the 2010 statewide ballot in California. And so I was actually a little frustrated. I was thinking, God, these pot people, they're relentless. They've got 4 initiatives filed on 1 year's ballot. And so I recognized the address of one of the initiative campaigns. And it was just so happened to be the old address of the retail clerks, which is the origins of UFCW. It happened to be the old address of the Downtown Retail Clerks Union that my grandmother belonged to. So I thought, gosh, well, actually, suddenly, when I noticed that address, it was kind of like getting hit by lightning. I suddenly began to, all of these thoughts began to run through my mind of the last 10 years I've been driving back and forth from the office and the airport to home. And I'm driving through downtown Oakland. Well, in 1999, downtown Oakland was Skid Row. And it had been ruined, literally by the crack epidemic and by other, just the whole economic situation was really hard on downtown Oakland. So, and downtown Oakland is really special to me. For one thing, I lived a mile from there for most of my life. And the other was when I was a little boy, I would go to downtown Oakland with my grandma. And so those were the fondest memories of my life. And when it became Skid Row, it was heartbreaking to me. And so anyway, I'm sitting there remembering that I had started about some years before, I had started noticing new commerce going on in downtown Oakland. Businesses were opening back up again. Burned out, broken down buildings, the glass was going back in, and businesses were there thriving, and people were bustling. Now, I had no idea that it had to do with cannabis or the Oaksterdam movement. I just didn't.
Wow.
But
Well,
suddenly I realized.
thought you were part of the Oaksterdam movement initially. Now I'm seeing where the connect between the Union and Oaksterdam comes in initially. Oaksterdam had been up and thriving for a little bit before you discovered it. That was the moment I was looking for, when lightning strikes, as you put it. Two things come together. Go ahead.
In 2005, Mayor Brown supported a cannabis ordinance in Oakland, which later became Measure Z. It failed with the city council, but so it was put on the ballot by some of the cannabis industry folks like Richard Lee and Jeff Jones and Rob Raich and some of those original Steph Shear, some of those original cannabis warriors in Oakland, ASA, the Patient ID Center, the Blue Sky Coffee Shop. Those Jeff Jones.
Yes.
So those folks had gotten Mike Parker, Big Mike. So those folks had gotten Measure Z on the ballot. The voters passed it, and that is what we began to know as Oaksterdam, and I believe that was 2005. So, and that was Oaksterdam, the region, the neighborhood. Then Oaksterdam University, I believe, was erected in 2006 or 2007. And that went in at 1600 Broadway in downtown Oakland. So I noticed this address. I see these initiatives. I'm suddenly remembering the economic revitalization that I had been witnessing for a period of years. Nobody could have ever told me with words or even pictures that an economic revitalization, that jobs creation, that orderliness, that the restoration of a wonderful, beautiful commercial area with the subsequent residences that go along with it.
They started to put in cafes and art and music venues and comedy venues and make it a place they made it a place where downtown Oakland can be come to as opposed to be avoided.
It created the let's just say it was a renaissance. It was
right.
it was the restoration with a new flavor, and a sparkle. And so it also what that realization told me was that there can be jobs creation, there can be economic revitalization, there can be restoration and or creation of industry and commerce, and it really just took the plant matter away from the stereotypical plant matter topic of marijuana, the drug, the Schedule I drug, the nightmare for communities. It just removed the stigma.
Reefer madness.
And what? Reefer madness.
Lived reefer madness for 45 years. 50.
And I got struck with these lightning bolts that just took the reefer madness out of the topic and inserted all the commerce and industry and I had a vision. I had a vision of a regulated cannabis industry where people had good union jobs, where business was created, where I was even had a brief moment of thinking of a family sitting at home on Thanksgiving, like I was sitting there Thanksgiving weekend, sitting around the table. Mom works at the dispensary in retail. Dad works at the production facility making infused products. Grandpa is retired from the cultivation facility. And,
Turkey is stuffed with purple?
No, just your average,
I had a vision.
Common.
You're not the only one with a vision, Dan. I had one too. That's all.
That's the thing I try to tell people. The whole movement part of it. The whole standing on a corner with a corncob pipe, standing around stoned, and hey, get stoned, be happy, have a good time. But
just don't drive and don't get the kids involved, and everything will be fine.
It was a vision of a good, wholesome, sober, American union industry for families that could raise families, for communities that could thrive. There would be tax revenues for schools, public safety and health, education, hospitals, infrastructure. That was the vision I had.
Now, how did you put it into play?
Well, I immediately went to work, and I went down to Oaksterdam, knocked on the door, and So when you're in the ballot industry and you work in politics and you work on state ballots, you know a winning campaign when you see one. So the first thing you want to see is a bunch of young people with empty coffee cups at 6:45 in the morning, empty pizza boxes with a bunch of nerds on laptops grinding away. And so that was the Saturday night of Thanksgiving. The Sunday morning of Thanksgiving, I jumped on my motorcycle, and I think everybody knows I'm a old-fashioned 1% Harley Davidson riding Oakland guy. And
Who's
I jumped on my bike.
not in a gang.
I'm not in the gang.
Yeah, right.
Well,
That's
let's
what
put it this
you
way.
got to tell people.
I'm also I'm not even in a motorcycle club. I just come from that community, and that's a very special community. And it's Oakland is to bike riders what Israel is to Jewish and other Christian folks. So
and other Christian folks.
Yes.
Everybody's welcome.
So, right, exactly. So anyway, I grubby old biker, jump on my motorcycle, ride down to this campaign office, 6:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning. And what do I see? I'm peeking through a window and I'm seeing young people with laptops at 6:30 in the morning grinding away, eating last night's dried up pizza, drinking coffee from from nasty, grungy coffee cups. And
everything you wanted. Everything you wanted. You knew you were home, so to speak.
I found the Stepford Wives. And so pounded on the door. Now, the other thing you want to see is these young people lunge on anybody that gives them the opportunity to talk to them about it. So I knocked on the window in my accoutrement, and they don't know me from anybody. And they say, and I say, hey, is this a campaign? And immediately the door flies open, and I'm almost drug in the door. Handed pamphlets, I'm handed phone lists, I'm told there's telephones in the corner, you can make calls, we're raising money, we're raising awareness, thanks for coming. And I just thought, wow, this has potential. Then I heard the imposing bellow. I heard the imposing bellow of a voice that I've known for a long time, and that was a guy named Doug Lenny. And Doug Lenny is a very well established, well known, admired, capable, vicious campaign consultant and warrior. And so I hear that bellow come from the back room, and suddenly I know these people really have a chance because they've got Doug Lenny in the back room running this machine. See, at the time, no mainstream person, a ballot industry person, would have ever touched the topic of cannabis. It would have been, we were literally like the drug dealer consultants. And we were the drug dealer campaign, or we were the pothead campaign.
Right.
So,
well, because it was Schedule 1, which is the big joke to begin with.
Well, in a multi-$100 trillion anti-cannabis campaign that's been running for 50 years. So I hear Doug bellow, "Who the hell is out there?" Something like that. So I bellow back, "It's your conscience." Well, he knows my voice. I know his voice. So he appears in the doorway of this little back room thing where he's mulled in. He says, and we both simultaneously say at the same time, "What the hell are you doing here?" Like two Mormons, who bump into each other in a brothel.
Gotcha.
Two good Mormon boys. So I always make jokes about Christians. I have to apologize.
Self-completing phrase. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So anyway, Doug and I sit down, we roll our sleeves up, we start talking. So I see the potential. I tell Doug, well, if you get the Oaksterdam people to join the union, I'll get the union to endorse the initiative, which at the time was called the Control, Tax, and Regulate Cannabis Initiative. And
so you joined forces, in other words.
We shook hands, we drank some coffee, we ate some nasty, grungy pizza, and I jumped on my bike and went back to work. Or I went to work, went to the union and said, hey, we're going to organize the marijuana people. So when they let me back in the door,
after showing you the door,
because the laughter,
it wasn't a mainstream drug at that time. And speak to the change. Life has changed. It's now legal in California for recreational use. Did you see the day when it would be at that time? Or did you think this was all going to be medical?
Oh, no. I knew it was coming. I had a vision, buddy. I had a vision that still is growing today, and that vision is a dignified, sincere, effective, safe, regulated, taxed, industrialized, commercial industry. And where is it? Just like alcohol. There's nobody. See, and here's where I always had struggles. We're trying to regulate cannabis and bring it to the mainstream. There's nobody sipping whiskey down at the alcohol distributors. There's nobody walking around with a pint in his pocket at the distillery. There is nobody. It's the separation of the. It's the separation of the movement and the industry. And let me tell you, there's an old understanding in politics. Movement-driven policy always fails because it doesn't have an economy. Industry-driven policy always wins because it has an economy that sustains its policy drives. So it's just like prohibition, when the only people who were pushing to end alcohol prohibition were bootleggers and people at the speakeasy who were consuming. Prohibition stood. Alcohol prohibition stood because it's just not a factor of reliability when it's the movement, when it's the consumer, when it's just the consumer and the consumer is purely recreational. Your movement is not going to survive. The introduction of medical, combined with its sustaining economy in medical, is the thing that opened the door. Now
you got to have the taxes coming in to appease the government.
Well, it's not just to appease the government. You have to pay for regulation. You have to pay for enforcement. You have to pay it has to pay for itself.
Right.
Don't get mad at me. It's not my fault. It's 21st century planet Earth. It's how the planet runs. And there are many people who want to change the planet, and I'm all for them. I prefer to do something that is going to create jobs union jobs, sustainable jobs, single
and you
earner
were
jobs.
off to a great start. You were doing that, and all of a sudden,
Melinda Haig. So I'll tell you what happened was, so we were successful in New York, Nevada. Well, first we had the first legalization initiatives passed in Colorado, Washington State, Alaska, and then Oregon. And that kind of opened the door to mainstream the entire topic of legalization. But then we went to work and I got the union to give me some resources so we could have some sort of campaign. And we did better than anybody thought. We went to New York and passed commercial medical cannabis in New York. After 19 years of legislative rallies, it failed every year. And the first year that we got involved in it, it passed. And then we went to Minnesota. We passed commercial medical cannabis in Minnesota. We went to Maine and we streamlined their commercial medical cannabis. I went to New Hampshire. I'll just go down the list. The line, I would get in the car, me and my organizers would get in the car. We'd drive, we'd start in Portland, Maine. We'd drive the 95. We went to New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut,
Rhode
New
Island.
Jersey, Rhode Island, New Jersey, New York, Delaware. All those states turned commercial medical cannabis. But I considered that one state because those states combined aren't even half of California. But there were 5 separate legislatures, 6 separate legislatures, and 6 separate legislative processes. Then we drove to Illinois, to Chicago. We got House Bill 51 passed, created commercial medical cannabis in Illinois. That was huge.
And you're scaring the federal government at this point.
Oh, no,
correct?
I'm not scaring them. I'm pissing them off. There's a U.S. attorney named Melinda Haig from the Northern District of California here, the one that indicted me. She's jumping on a national soapbox saying, and so she says, I'm the one that's plagued with the Emerald Triangle and Mendocino, Humboldt Lake, Del Norte, the whole Emerald Triangle of Northern California where the whole movement started. The movement for the for the farms, for the industrialized farms happened. She says, I'm plagued with this reefer madness here and I'm going to stop it. I'm Joan of Arc and I'm going to stop this reefer madness. And so she started driving up and down the counties in California because at the same time we were doing those states, we were also going county by county in California. And so we got the 9.31 program passed in Mendocino County, the heart, the Bethlehem of cannabis. And the only thing greater is Garberville, and that's the Jerusalem of cannabis.
That area is just terrific.
Clear Lake, and yeah. So we got all these ordinances passed. So she called me one day and she says, we're going to take a drive down 101. And I'm going to hand out indictments to elected officials and tell them that if they don't rescind the ordinances that you folks have been working on, then I'm going to indict them for conspiracy and racketeering and all sorts of stupid stuff. And she did. So I met her in Humboldt County at her request. We left District Attorney Paul Gallegos' office. We drove county by county down the state. She went to Mendocino. She stood in the county supervisor's meeting and says, I have blank indictments here for all of you. If you don't rescind your cannabis ordinance right now, I'm going to go to the federal courthouse, have them filed, and you're all going to be indicted. At the same time, other U.S. attorneys in Washington State and Oregon were also doing the same thing. And then Ben Galland from the Central District of California, the U.S. Attorney, Laura Duffy from the Southern District. And so Melinda Haig was the ringleader. And so she's literally, and then we're having battling press conferences. She's on the steps of the county courthouse in Humboldt County saying, I'm going to stop cannabis, this reefer madness, and I'm across the street at the state building on the steps there having a press conference saying, control, tax, regulate. Here is initiatives. Here is policy. We are going to have a policy response to policy attacks. So then Nevada passed. Nevada was SB 374. Then it was authored by Senator Tick Segerblum and Mark, who is now the lieutenant governor in Nevada. I can't remember his name. Mark Hutchinson, a Democrat and a Republican. So the bill passes the legislature in Nevada, and everybody swears that the Republican governor, Brian Sandoval, is not going to sign the bill. With some conversations and some input from us and others, Governor Sandoval signs the bill and creates the Nevada Department of Public Behavioral Science, something or other, which is now the Commercial Cannabis Regulatory Agency for Nevada. That's why she hated me so much. I'm the person who created what became known as the 10th Amendment assertable components. And what the 10th Amendment is the state's rights to break off from the federal government, be a laboratory of democracy, and do what it needs to do for its citizens.
Right. Now, is that still up in the air at this late date?
No. These are the states that are now what Attorney General Bob Cole said in his second memo on August 13th, 2013. He essentially said states that have their own agency, their own thing that the state can assert as its 10th Amendment assertable component. And lawyers will understand this, and hopefully everybody else will learn to understand it. An assertable the state to say we're breaking off and exercising our right as a state has to have it has to have an agency. It has to have a regulatory agency. And the state has to move that. It has to be adjudicated. It has to be approved by a judge. Judge has to say, yes, the state has moved to assert its 10th Amendment component, its 10th Amendment right, and therefore it can break off from the federal government, do its own thing. But that agency has to do things. It has to draw the state's borders. It has to have an enforcement component, its own police department to enforce the regulations. It has to give immunity. It has to claim its own sovereign immunity, and it has to make immune its neighboring states. And we saw the lawsuits between Idaho and Colorado, and I think it was Missouri or whoever the other bordering states with Colorado. Those states were suing Colorado because people were going to Colorado, purchasing cannabis, crossing state lines, and then bringing this felonious federal offense into their states and causing them havoc with their police departments, having to arrest people and more enforcement and more police. So anyway, all of this was topped off with, we went to Congress with ASA, And ASA had been running something called the Hinchy-Farr Rohrbacher Amendment. That was Congressman's Farr, Hinchy, Congressman Dana Rohrbacher had sponsored a bill that essentially was written by ASA with some help from the OCW and others. It was just a movement bill that said that was enacted in the 2016 budget. It went from being a bill to a budget amendment. And that's a quick sleight of hand in Congress. If you can't get your bill passed, then you attach it as a trailer to a budget, an amendment in the budget.
Right.
So we got it amended in the 2016 budget that the federal government could not spend another penny going after cannabis in states that had the agency that I had designed. And so that's when she came unglued. So Obama signed that amendment July 27, 2015, which created a federal law essentially that said she couldn't spend any more money going after marijuana.
How did she come after you if she couldn't spend?
Now hold on. July 27th, the amendment was signed. August 11th, I was arrested. August 15th, she resigned. August 22nd, my birthday, I was indicted. When that amendment passed, she lost her mind, came unglued, did things that she probably normally wouldn't do, and went and had me arrested on a complaint that had nothing to do with cannabis. See, that's why I was arrested that's why I was indicted for things like accepting illegal payments, accepting bribes, making bribes, extortion, money laundering. See, none of those are cannabis issues. So she could spend money.
But are these things she just pulled out of her hat, so to speak?
Well, what happened was they had several undercover people, including, and I want people to listen to this very carefully, including Derek Peterson of TerraTech, who we discovered has been a paid and immunized informant for the FBI and is granted license that is otherwise illegal activity. He's granted that license by the FBI to do what he does, and they also help him advance his marijuana publicly traded stock corporation. And this guy, Derek Peterson, who's also known as Derek Appadizano, who's also known as Derek Cortez. But he's mostly known as Derek Peterson in the industry, and his company TerraTech, which is a publicly traded stock corporation. So they sicked him on me, and he joined forces with another guy that my lawyer, years before I started organizing cannabis workers, my lawyer had brought into a commercial development that I had been doing on my family's property in Oakland for 10 years before. And years before I started working on cannabis, my lawyer brought in this grower. Didn't tell me anything. Just brought in this grower, said that it was an investor in this development we were doing on property that my family had. So that guy went to work with the FBI, along with Peterson. And then they arrested my lawyer for just obnoxious, horrible, ridiculous. They arrested him for all the things that they claim about me. And much of what they claim about me is stuff he was doing. And their theory was, well, if he's doing it and he's Rush's lawyer, Rush did it. So they had this team and they had this other slime ball guy named Carl Anderson and his son Forrest Anderson. We're also working for the FBI as informants. So everybody except for my lawyer, Mark Trebeek, and this guy, Martin Kaufman, who's part owner in the Bloom dispensaries, Bloom of Oakland and Bloom of Las Vegas. Those two didn't have pre-existing relationships with the FBI, but they went to work for the FBI to get me. And so for years, these people wore wires on me. The feds had my rental cars bugged, my hotel rooms bugged, my meeting spaces bugged, and they had these people wearing wires on me, and these people were reading scripts to me written by the FBI, trying to manipulate me into committing crimes.
When did you get the idea that something's fishy? Somebody's after.
Well, here's the problem, Ralph. We knew all along that the feds were on us. I mean, they used us for training. Their agents were having a great time traveling the country and doing the deadhead tour, so to speak. That's what we used to call the folks that followed the campaign. They were having a great time hanging out in dispensaries and cultivation facilities, getting tattoos and piercings, and they were getting training for their undercover. When you're in the FBI now, you have to have an undercover persona. Some of them are winos. Some of them are Middle Eastern backpack carrying people that look like they're terrorists. Sometimes they team up and they become husband and wife couples, and they have, these phony automated babies that they push around, and some of them are dispensary operators supposedly, or cultivators. Everybody's got to have an undercover persona in the FBI. So they were just having a great time practicing and getting credit for all their, comp time for their character.
They're learning to be undercover.
Right. They call it character development. You have to develop your character. And then as your character grows in the FBI, you get promotions and you get pay grade raises, and so these guys are having a great time. And I know they're there. What I don't know is that at some point they get frustrated because they can't catch me doing something, so they arrest my lawyer and then use him to wear wires on me, to read scripts to me, to get me to commit crimes. Now, here's why I pled guilty. My lawyer had owed me several $100,000 because before I went to UFCW full-time, to work for UFCW full-time, I've been a private investigator for 30 years. July 31st, 2017 was 30 years. I made my living. I had jobs that I did for the union, but they were gratis jobs. I didn't get paid for them. I was a member, and I held, committee positions, or I was given responsibilities as a member. Didn't really go to work for the union full time until cannabis.
Dan, what type of trade were you involved in? What did you do to get into the union way back?
Oh, just a multi-generational union family. And as a young man, I got in trouble as a Teamster, and I couldn't be a Teamster anymore. So the folks at the Butchers Union pulled me in and said, "We love you. Come help us with politics because you're a natural at politics." And so I went to UFCW in 1987. No, 1989. I went to UFCW Local 120, which is now part of UFCW Local 5. And I was given the title of political director. But all that meant was I was a member, and I was the one that kept track of politics. And wasn't a staff job or anything. The union liked having me because I was really good at politics. And I grew up in a household where we sat at the table every day and said, what did we do for the union today? Predominantly, my family were Teamsters. My grandmother was in the UFCW, so I followed in Grandma's footsteps. So anyway, they arrest my lawyer, and he's committed some atrocious crimes from what I've seen. He's laundering money for people in the industry. He's creating these atrocious tax schemes. So at some point, the FBI sends undercover FBI agents into his office posing as mobsters, and they tell him, they threaten him. So he thinks the mob is threatening him, and they tell him they want him to set me up. So he goes to work setting me up. And at first he thinks he's working for the mob, setting me up. Then they arrest him and tell him, no, we're really the FBI. And so they said, we want you to tell us really bad things about Dan Rush so that we can really make him a bad guy. So now the one mistake I made was I allowed him to continue to pay me the money he owed me from 10 years before. Literally 10 years before. He was still paying me money that he had owed me for work as a private investigator. And he owed me hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, and I'm literally having to demand that he pays me. So, in North America, in the U.S., it is illegal for a union official, a union employee, to accept a payment from an industry representative, from an employer or their representatives. So following me around the country, he's become the primary cannabis industry lawyer. And he's making loan payments to me from loans from decades, from years before. And then he's telling me I can't pay you. And I can't pay you. And I'm telling him, well, I know you've got this client here. I know you've got that client there. And for a long time, we worked as a team. He was part of developing the theory for the 10th Amendment. He was part of getting the whole thing off the ground. So, of course, I would send people to him when they needed representation because he was my friend. And he started off with me. We were two guys in Oakland kicking off this beginning the end of Prohibition thing. Well, the FBI turned that into I'm sending people to him to get kickbacks. And the problem was he was making payments to me, but they weren't about kickbacks. They were about paying off a loan. Well, the Taft-Hartley Act does not define the difference between people that owe you money that are employers making loan payments or industry representatives are giving you kickbacks for favors. Wow. So technically, I committed a crime. I accepted money from an industry representative. It was a payment. And so that's why I pled guilty.
Dan, did you know that was a crime when you accepted the money?
That is the most obscure definition of that law that I've ever heard. And I did not consider it wrong for me to accept loan repayments from my own lawyer who owed me money from years before. I did not consider it to be wrong.
Okay, pure and simple.
So the other problem,
you had no idea you were breaking the law.
No.
And
yes, that's accurate. But here's the other thing. He would come into the hospital. So the last 2 years of the campaign, I was really sick. I had acquired something called MRSA, which is a staph infection that diabetics get. I had 2 amputations on my feet, on one of my feet. I had a series of surgeries and procedures over 14 months that kept me off of work for 6 months. And I'm not the kind of person that takes time off of work. And I was ill. I had lost 125 pounds over a 3-year period. I had been traveling 20,000 miles a week, and that's not a month, a week. And I've been doing that for 7 years. And along with the travel came all of the, changing the face of cannabis and turning elected officials in our direction. So I was tired and I was sick. And my lawyer, who was working for the FBI, and his name is Mark Terbeek, let me spell that for you, because I want everybody to know, who testified in court later, testified against me in court, as well as worked for the FBI for 14 months or whatever it was. This guy was coming to the hospital, and I'm literally in a hospital surgical recovery room. And this guy is reading me scripts, telling me that I owed people money, that what were really investments were actually loans, and they had to be paid immediately. And if I didn't pay them immediately, the people were going to take my home and my family's home and our. Now this is my lawyer telling me this stuff. Sitting there in a hospital room, sick, depleted, amputated, tired, and my lawyer comes in and says, "Hey, I made a mistake. That thing that we thought was a loan, or that I told you was an investment, was really a loan, and it has to be paid in 60 days." And we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm overwhelmed. And so he reads me these scripts written by the FBI, and their intention is to get me mad and get me upset, or to make me do criminal acts out of desperation. They did this to me for 14 months, literally months of time in the hospital.
Wow.
And this is my lawyer. So this is the level of scoundrel that we know as the FBI and federal prosecutors. So, yeah, I mean, and they, I don't know what else to say.
Well, you've been through it. Anything you learned from it that, not to be taught a lesson. You don't need to be taught a lesson for anything. But is there anything that changed your way of thinking, changed your ideology?
Yeah, Ralph, I'll never, ever, ever try to work for an extended period of time on such an issue like that, being so sick. Because what ended up happening was, for months and months, I had my lawyer telling me, "Don't worry, I have all of your business taken care of. Everything is safe. You can rely on me. You just go travel the country, carry the message, educate public officials, and don't worry about your own life at home. I'll take care of it for you." Well, I'll never do that again. And that's what I did for years. I left my life and my family's lives in the hands of this person. And the other thing was I would have seen these guys coming. I just, as a matter of fact, the FBI was playing tapes in court where I'm literally telling their undercover, I call them rats and fabricators, where they're I'm telling the rat fabricator, what you're saying to me sounds like a script for an indictment. So go back and tell your special agent in charge to write you a better script. Well, we laughed it off, but I knew deep down inside something was off. And if I hadn't have been so sick and so vulnerable, relying on people, I would have just laughed at it. Most of all, my attorney, my most trusted friend, and my most trusted person, representative. Yeah. And they used him and these conversations, these tape conversations, where he's telling me lies, that my home's going to be taken, that my family's going to be on the streets, that I'm going to be disgraced, and that there's a way out. All we have to do is do this or do that. And telling this to somebody laying in a hospital bed with parts of their body missing, sick from months on the road. I just, I'll never I'll never let that kind of responsibility. It was negligent of me to try to hang on to the responsibility. I should have turned it over to somebody else. But I felt so deeply, Ralph, that this was my life's work, and that I had to bring that vision to life. And
well, Dan, I'm sorry you had to go through this. That's the only way.
well, it's okay. I get sentenced on
We're
November
about
13th.
a week away from sentencing. What's going
Yeah,
through
about 2
your
weeks.
mind? Pardon me?
We're about 2 weeks away from sentencing, November 13th.
2 weeks, yeah.
So the plea agreement that I made, and I had to, that's the other problem. I had to plead to things that I agreed with. I'm not going to plead to something I didn't do. And for 2 years, the FBI and the prosecutors tried to get me to go to work for them. They wanted me to tell on other people. They wanted me to do the same thing to other good people that they couldn't entrap on their own, or that weren't doing anything wrong. See, they call it targeting. They don't even say that somebody's done something. What they say is, we've targeted so-and-so. So what that means is, whether or not you've done anything, doesn't matter. They're going to go in, they're going to send in fabricators, they're going to arrest the people around you, they're going to get them into deals where they tell those people that they'll be ruined if they don't work against you.
So they'll plant evidence on these people?
Well, they create it. They fabricate it. I'll give you a perfect example. DEA training was happening a couple of years ago in San Francisco. And so they were trying to train the agents. They were training the agents on how to entrap somebody. So they had a script. They wanted a case where somebody had driven a car to rob a drug dealer. And so these agents go out with the script in hand. They go to the local bar where people are known to hang out, because there's a union hall around there where people sign up for part-time work. So they go to this bar specifically looking for people somebody down on their luck. They specifically do it at Christmas time. They send agents in, and they start trying to recruit somebody who's sitting there down on his luck waiting for a call from the union hall down the street. And they tell him, hey, can you drive a car? If you can, we're going to go rob a drug dealer. And if you drive the car, all you got to do is drive the car. We'll go in, we'll rob him, we'll come out. You drive us there, you drive us away, and we'll give you a third of 100 pounds of cocaine or whatever it was. Well, the cocaine didn't exist. The drug dealer didn't exist. They get this guy at Christmas time who's trying to figure out how to feed his kids and give them some kind of Christmas, to say, okay, sure, I'll drive the car. I don't have to do anything except drive the car, sure. So the guy agrees to drive the car. They get in a Fed car. They have him drive to one of their safe houses. The two agents go in. They come back out with bags and bags of whatever. They jump in the car and they say, okay, take off. The guy takes off, and they arrest him. The cocaine never existed.
The whole thing just to arrest a stranger, a guy.
And but the whole purpose was they wanted to train the agents. Yeah,
train the agents. So they, oh my God.
So this guy's now.
Can't they just
now
say,
this guy's,
okay, this is all like candid camera. We did the training. We're going to release you, but don't be stupid enough to drive anymore. If you're down, that kind of thing.
Right. But see, they've been
through
given
the hopper.
So let me tell you, that guy's doing 10 years now. I think he's 3 years into a mandatory 10 years because they claimed that there were guns involved. So here's why they do it. They get given millions and millions of dollars. And what they have to do is they have to produce arrests, prosecutions, and convictions for those millions of dollars. Well, they don't want to go out and confront a real criminal that will shoot back at them. to commit a crime, they go out and find innocent people. They put them in these positions. They fabricate them. Now, the division of the FBI that came after me, and they do that so that then they go back and say, hey, look, Commander, we got this guy and this guy and this guy, and that's what we did with your $5 million.
Right.
And they get patted on the back.
We talked off the air. You gave me a figure. I'm sure it's an estimate, not the exact figure. How many bucks have they spent on your case?
Millions. It was like $27 million or something like that.
Well, just out of curiosity.
And Ralph, I don't know the exact figures. That was just estimates of agent time, equipment time, time on the road. Those were numbers that some of the experts that were working with my lawyers. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me either. Now, the division of the FBI that came after me is called the Public Corruption Division. So these guys, they don't have to set up drug dealers and gun runners. These guys have to set up people in public positions. Like,
and if they're against the federal position, and marijuana certainly, cannabis certainly
was against their position,
a threat to their policy. And,
but see, here's their real goal in the Public Corruption Division. Their real goal is headlines. We got this trusted public servant doing these scoundrelous things. We got.
Dan, it was a headline when you were arrested. It was a shock to me. I'll tell you, we knew each other briefly before, and I knew of the work you did, and I was taken aback. And I wasn't the only one, as you know. But I remember looking into your eyes. I said, this is bullshit. This is not the kind of guy who would do that. Way before you. So
I'm going to blow my own horn a little bit here, Ralph. I come from the same house that 5 generations of my family comes from in Oakland. I come from the same labor movement that 5 generations of my family come from. I come from the same activist-driven community that 4 generations of my family come from. I have a lifetime of proven commitment to my community, to my union, to people that love me, and the reason, and to social issues and the labor movement, and then it became cannabis. I have a lifetime of commitment to these things. And that's why the FBI, when they wrote the scripts for their fabricators, for their rats to execute on me, they wrote them in ways that made anybody question my character. They said I took bribes to sell out my members. They said I took payments to sell out
from dispensaries and what have you.
Well, not only that, but I was part of the Instituto Laboral de la Raza, a community organization that's been open for 30 years. And since 1997, I've raised millions of dollars to keep that place open and running. Millions of dollars. And I never got paid a dime, never asked for a dime. I served as the treasurer for them for many years. My family has a 30-year history with this organization. And they had to soil me and my work at the Instituto by claiming that the only thing I was doing down there was being a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, pocket-lining, cigar-smoking, sociopath, and that anything I did down there was to line my own pockets. And I got to tell you, that really irks me. And right now what's going on is my lawyers are fighting in what's called the pre-sentencing agreement to take out the soil that the FBI, that I had nothing to do with what I pled to, because I wouldn't have pled to the kind of thing that they're trying to imply. I spent decades down at Instituto raising money to keep the place open. using my own money and borrowing money from people to keep the place open when we ran out of money. And then having events and summits that raised millions of dollars to keep the doors open and keep the workers there working so they could help Spanish-speaking, Latin, immigrant, working, poor families with labor and domestic issues. Sorry.
Yeah. What's the woman's name, the prosecutor? Let's get her name out there
Two
one
of
more
them.
time.
Melinda Haig and then this guy, John Heeman, took over after her.
Okay. What gets me is that she retired so quickly after your indictment.
Days. Now, their story was, she's moving on to greener pastures. Ralph, U.S. attorneys don't retire. It's like saying a Supreme Court justice retired. They make $500,000 a year. Their personal police department is the FBI, DEA, ATF, Bureau of Land Management. I mean, it's their personal police department.
Right.
These guys just don't retire.
They're not going to give that up.
Yeah.
What did greener pastures mean?
Oh, well, it's my understanding her work now revolves around pharmaceutical industry companies. And I'll bet you they're the ones that make cancer medicines.
And they're the ones that have the most to lose as marijuana prospers.
That's right.
Ironically.
That's right.
So,
and she was the Reefer Madness U.S. attorney.
Right. Who was putting money into her coffers along the way. Dan, it's a vicious world. I'll tell you. So 2 weeks, what's going through your mind? What are the possibilities?
Well, the judge can give me anywhere from probation, and that's why it's important that this interview doesn't come out till after sentencing, Ralph.
Certainly won't.
Because the FBI, if it's on the net, they'll find it. They have people that get up daily looking for anything that has my name involved with it. Then they want to give it to the judge and say that he doesn't really want to accept responsibility for his crimes. I accept responsibility for the crime that I committed, and that's what I pled guilty to. Nothing more, nothing less. And the obscurities involved in it are my fault because I didn't pay attention, and I had been put in a position of trust, and I should have been able to spot and scrutinize and eliminate those obscurities. So, yes, I committed a crime. The things going through my mind is hundreds of people have written letters and made videos to tell the judge, please don't lock Dan up. I'm really involved in the recovery community with a couple of anonymous 12-step programs who I won't name because of our principle of anonymity. But they're very well-known 12-step programs that help people with drinking and substance abuse issues. I probably spend 30, 40 hours a week, and I have for the last 15-plus years, not dedicated, it's my thing. I want to help people find what I've found, which is a life of fulfillment in recovery. I'm a clean and sober addict and alcoholic, and have been. It's my life, and I love helping people find what people help me find. So a lot of people have made videos and written letters expressing who they are and where they came from and where they are, and many of those people have been really gracious in saying that I had something to do with them finding recovery. And part of that means that broken families have been reunited. And addict mothers and fathers who were dysfunctional or even abusive or had just gone to the dark side are now back and loving parents with their children. And kids that were in broken homes have both mom and dad back and have a chance to have a decent life. So those folks have written letters and made videos to the judge, and frankly, some of them are so compelling, I can't believe that they're talking about me.
You should be proud,
so
honestly.
I am proud. And we're asking the judge to allow me to continue to do that by staying on the streets. So I can't help somebody learn how to live on the streets if I'm locked up. And you can't teach people that are locked up how to live on the streets. It's a process that happens on the streets.
It's almost a catch-22.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like so many things with drug and alcohol and addiction problems. So that, and I don't like to admit it, but I'm almost 60 years old now, and I've got my own struggles with health.
I hope that's under control, Dan.
Well, it's under control now, but it won't be if I'm incarcerated. There's just no way. See, people that are my age and in my condition that get locked up, they go and, they just shrivel up and die. I'm not like, it's not like taking O.J. Simpson at the age of 35 or 40 or whatever, and he goes in top physical condition, and he's a top physical condition kind of guy and gets out and lives a normal life 10 years later. I'm somebody who's struggling just to be okay. And that requires a 24/7 focus and my ability to have access to exercise and the right medicine.
And your needs and your mental state and all of it. They have no need to put you away at this point for any amount of time.
Well, it's unfortunate to put it like this, but they don't like to lock people up that are going to cost them money. The prison industrial system really is. It has an economy built into it, and part of what they call the rehabilitation system is really an industrialized, economic-driven opportunity for private prisons to sell slave labor to scrupulous corporations that want to pay people 8 and 9 and 12 cents an hour.
And to say nothing about judges owning a stock in the prison and sentencing kids that should be home with their parents studying for their homework.
Or Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who has thousands and thousands and thousands of stock investments in private prisons.
Does
He's
he
now
really?
standing on and he stands on a bully pulpit and tells his U.S. attorneys, lock up everybody you can, go for the maximum sentences, lock up the marijuana people, go for the maximum sentences. See, the Obama administration, by executive order, had begun the decline and subsequent elimination of the private prison system.
But it never got reduced from a number one drug, Class A drug.
Well, yeah. But Obama's plan was a 10-year plan. So Trump, by executive order, eliminated that plan. And so now the private prison system industry is healthy, and it's a publicly traded stock system. So he took care of his stockholder, his Wall Street buddies.
Yeah,
and
he's doing that on every level.
Well, the prison stocks that had dwindled to pennies on the dollar, right in October of 2016, they're healthy again, and they're pumping in over $100 a stock share now instead of just pennies. So you're going to see a huge push to lock people up. But hopefully I fit in the category of he's too fat, he's too old, he talks too much.
You'd be a prison lawyer.
Yeah, I don't want to be
They
a
have
prison
those,
lawyer.
you know. You'd sit in the library with a book, and they'd make a movie out of you. Tell me how the movie's coming, Dan.
Okay, so that's a really sensitive topic, but
You want to talk about that after the trial?
Well, there's a mini series, 3-parted, 6-hour mini series that's being explored for mainstream cable network, and there is a book deal that's rumored to happen that will call for 3 books. The first in a series, first part will be the trial, or the case. The second part will be about my work in cannabis overall. And the third part will be about my life and my work in the labor movement before that. So people will get to see the drama at first and then get to see the reason for it, and then they'll get to know me.
Who's going to play the part of Dan Rush?
Well, if I get my way, it'll be Jeff Bridges. I love Jeff Bridges.
Very good one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can see that.
Yeah.
Who's going to play Pam?
Hopefully Jennifer Aniston.
Oh, okay.
We're both in love with Jennifer Aniston.
All right. Hey, a man can dream.
That's right.
And by the way, you're just lusting in your heart. President Carter taught us that.
I got to tell you, I'd only work on things that deliver me to my bliss, and that means that there's passion and eagerness and justice and something. It's got to be for good reasons.
Dan, I'm glad we got to hear it in your voice. I wish you the best in a couple of weeks.
Hey, Ralph, this is the first interview I've done in over 2 years, besides one little magazine thing I did. And I purposely didn't speak for 2 years because my lawyers wouldn't let me during the case. And now that's all coming to a head. And so yours is going to be
I'm honored you chose me, sir.
Oh, no, the honor is mine, Ralph. You have been a dear friend. You've been a great warrior for social justice. You are the ideal warrior for
Dan,
cannabis.
please don't understate it. We got to do better with words. Love you, my pal. Be good.
Here's what's next. Here's what's next.
Yes.
Hemp.
I know it's next to me.
Hemp.
I'll tell you that. I can't hang up soon enough. What do you mean? What's next?
Hemp. Okay, buddy.
Hemp. Be well, please.
All right. Thank you.
We'll talk soon. This comes out directly after sentencing.
Thank you, sir.
Be well.
Talk to you soon. Okay.
Adios.
Love you, brother. Bye-bye.